Imagine standing at the edge of a vast Indian desert where the midday heat makes the dunes shimmer like an ocean frozen in time. Beneath your feet, hidden under centuries of wind-blown sand, lies a skeleton of streets far older than anything the Roman Empire would ever build. This is the lost city of Kalibangan, a name that now whispers from the baked earth of Rajasthan, carrying secrets no living voice can explain. When its brick bones were first uncovered, the world of archaeology was confronted with a deeply unsettling chronological paradox. Long before the marble temples of Greece and the paved forums of Rome, an unknown people here carved perfect right angles into the prehistoric wilderness. The very concept of a planned urban grid was thought to be a classical European invention, a hallmark of supposed civilizational superiority. Kalibangan shattered that comfortable illusion the moment the surveyor's brush dusted off its first intersection of perfectly aligned streets. You must picture the silence of that first evening. On the dig site, the low sun casting long shadows from excavated walls that had not seen light for 4,000 years. The archaeologists moved slowly through the trenches, like intruders into a mausoleum, aware they were walking on a mathematical dream from the dawn of the Bronze Age. What they pulled from the grip of the Thar Desert was not a haphazard cluster of huts, but a meticulously partitioned city divided into two distinct elevated mounds. The main thoroughfares were oriented precisely to the cardinal directions, not by chance, but with the deliberateness of a priest-architect reading the cosmic order. And just beneath the surface of those lanes, the true genius of the system lay hidden in silence. A network of baked brick drainage. Water, that ancient maker and destroyer of civilizations, was channeled away with an efficiency medieval London would have envied centuries later. But the discovery of Kalibangan begins not with stone, but with the river that died, the spectral Saraswati whose dried-up bed snakes mournfully through this landscape. Ancient hymns spoke of this mighty river nurturing a garden of civilization, and yet modern geologists found only a phantom channel under the sand. Close to that phantom waterway, a compact site was first properly excavated in the mid-20th century by the Archaeological Survey of India. As the dig team sliced away the layers of time, they unearthed two distinct eras of settlement, one stacked beneath the other like a palimpsest of stone. The earlier level showed a people already breaking ground with sophistication. But it was the mature Harappan city that stunned the world into awed silence. You have to understand the nerve of what they built. A fortified citadel with gateways, guardrooms, and massive walls constructed from mud bricks dried in the ancient sun. But the true signature of this civilization was not its defensive walls. It was the obsessive, almost sacred trust in the straight edge and the right angle. The lower city was laid out in a grid where blocks were separated by lanes exactly 1.8 meters wide, and main arteries running an unwavering 7.2 meters across. There was no organic, meandering growth here. Every residential block was conceived before its first brick was laid, a frozen thought of absolute order. Inside those pits lay ash, terracotta cakes, and remnants of animal sacrifice, a startling glimpse into fire rituals that predate any known Vedic altar. These fire altars stood in a row on a ceremonial platform, each one a silent scream of devotion from a belief system we still cannot fully translate. You are now entering the labyrinth of a civilization that could map a cosmos into a city grid, but left no Rosetta Stone to translate its final messages. The streets of Kalibangan come to a dead end against a wall of silence, because the hand that drew them left behind no conquest lists, no royal decrees, no epic poems. We stand before their drainage cuts and perfectly corbelled culverts, understanding their mathematics, but comprehending absolutely nothing of their inner lives. Some researchers theorize that the meticulous planning reflected a powerful centralized priesthood, a theocracy that built the city as a mirror of the divine heavens. Others suggest the grid was a defense mechanism of a deeply egalitarian society, a system that refused to allow one family to encroach upon another's sacred space with a crooked wall. There is a haunting uniformity in the size of the baked bricks themselves, a standard ratio of 1:4, used across hundreds of miles of the Indus realm. It suggests a mercilessly enforced cultural code, a rhythm beaten into the clay by a hand that spanned an area larger than the old kingdom of Egypt. Yet the materials also whisper of a raw, dry land. The stones buried in the site show clear geological evidence of a cataclysmic shift in the river's flow. The Saraswati, once the lifeblood quenching their kilns and fields, began to wither in a tectonic upheaval that strangled the Earth's aquatic veins. You can sense the slow, creeping dread that settled over the straight streets as the grain stores emptied, observed from silent watchtowers by guardians with no relief to send. The end came not in a blaze of conquest, but in a quiet, desperate abandonment, a drawing down of shutters and a long, dusty exodus into an unrecorded horizon. Where archaeology falters with fact, the humid air of human speculation begins to fill the vacuum with competing theories. A darker hypothesis suggests that the legendary nuclear events of ancient epics might explain the vitrified stones occasionally found. Though science finds no radiation burns here, only the slow rot of time. The rational mind leans toward the devastating shift of the monsoon, a climatic knife that severed the head of the hydrological cycle this city depended upon. Some geologists point to the bitter salt creeping into the well water, an invisible poison that turned the soil from a mother into an adversary. But the labyrinth deepens when you realize this was not an isolated experiment. It was part of a vast, nameless empire of grids stretching to Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. Unlike the pyramids of Giza that scream ego into the sky, the effort at Kalibangan was poured downward into the invisible infrastructure of civic survival. Therein lies the crushing contradiction, a civilization technically advanced enough to standardize waste disposal, yet opaque enough to lack any discernible seat of military power. It is as if the entire populace collectively agreed to vanish, erasing their names and faces, leaving behind only their plumbing and their perfect street corners. This strange modesty has driven some scholars to call them a capitalist mercantile state, where the seal was the coin and the trade route was the king. Perhaps the grid was not a holy mandala, but a real estate scheme, a standardized packing algorithm for anonymous merchants living in interchangeable housing blocks. Yet that cold interpretation collides against the strange isolated fire altars, redolent with the smell of burnt bone and spilled clarified butter in a ritual of atonement. You cannot reconcile the dispassionate street surveyor with the priest kindling a sacred flame under a moonlit sky, unless that society held a schism within its very soul. And so the mystery mutates from a simple question of who built the streets to a much deeper, more unsettling question. What aspect of the human psyche have we lost? The fish symbol appears again and again, a pictogram of a creature gliding through water, yet it may signify a star, a god, a quantity, or a sound we cannot hear. This is the absolute zero of historical recovery, a hyper-advanced metropolis reduced to a handful of mute pictograms that cannot even tell us its own name. Kalibangan itself is a modern label, meaning black bangles, a name given by local villagers who found the ancient debris scattered under their plows. The original city's name, the true sound, spoken by its inhabitants under that harsh desert sun, is a lost frequency absorbed by the sand. If you stand over the excavated lanes at the site today, you can trace the geometry with your fingers, but the silence is a physical weight pressing against your eardrums. The human obsession with this place stems from that silence because nature abhors a mystery more than a vacuum, and our species is nature's most curious child. Every archaeologist who has scraped away the dust here has felt the ghost of a coherent, intelligent order just out of reach, like a dream fading upon waking. They left the dig site with aching backs and sunburnt necks, haunted by the feeling that the city had observed them while they were observing it. The human element of Kalibangan is not just the diggers with their trowels, but the local tradition that walked this dead riverbed long before the excavation license was ever signed. Villagers spoke of a vanished golden age, of a river goddess who abandoned them, of cursed black bangles in the earth that the city was ultimately named for. These were not mere superstitions. They were the garbled oral echoes of a 6,000-year-old cataclysm that fractured the landscape and the memory of a people. The minds that once marched down those rigid, straight avenues were no different from yours. They ached, loved, feared the dark, and looked at the same starry vaults above. And yet there is a profound danger in this silence. A cognitive trap that modern historians have regularly fallen into. We tend to project our own fascinations onto the blank canvas of a lost civilization, turning grids into utopias and unknown priests into benevolent sage kings. Some interpret the lack of weapons and ostentatious palaces as proof of a peaceful, egalitarian paradise, a society without war or class. But the heavy fortification walls and the strict partitioning of the citadel from the lower town scream a subtler, structural violence of separation and high-walled privilege. The fire altar is a warm, communal image of prayer, but it is also a place where blood was spilt into a fire, and we do not know whose blood it was. You cannot look upon a city of 10,000 souls with a drainage network that puts a Roman dynasty to shame and call them simple. You are dealing with an apex predator of urban logic that somehow decided to walk away from its greatest creation and let the Saraswati swallow it whole. The toll this mystery takes on the modern mind is the realization that technological mastery provides no immunity against geological betrayal or atmospheric shift. A satellite image today reveals the pale, dried vein of the Gagar Hakra riverbed slashing through the Thar Desert like a scar across a memory. If you trace that scar with your eye, you are tracing the exact route along which a civilization was conceived, birthed, and starved to death. The grid of Kalibangan remains buried there, a geometric ghost, enduring as the ultimate monument to human vulnerability disguised as human hubris. It leaves us the sturdy brick and the durable pipe, but carefully dissolves the laughter, the terror, the lullabies, and the last desperate prayers. There is a comfort in believing history is a solved puzzle until you stand at the edge of this silence and hear nothing but the wind threading through extinct channels. The eternal fade of Kalibangan is not just the fading of its painted walls or the crumbling of its drainage lips. It is the fading of certainty itself. As the desert twilight drains the color from the sky, the shadows of the excavation trenches merge into a single dark labyrinth across the sand. The sand clock empties slowly, grain by grain, and with each passing year, the boundary between what we know and what we guess becomes more porous. The abyss beneath our feet is not a physical void, but an epistemological one. a gap in the human record where the stars look down and watch a dead city sleep. We have mapped the surface of Mars with more clarity than we have mapped the linguistic and emotional world of the Indus River peoples. The paradox is monstrous. A society so advanced in the sewage of the body, yet so utterly failed in the conveyance of the soul to its descendants. Perhaps that was their final, greatest secret, that they never intended us to know them, that their anonymity was a deliberate act of metaphysical erasure. Or perhaps the truth is more tragic, that the drying river washed away the libraries of palm leaf and parchment that held the key to those flat, square seals. All high civilizations collapse eventually, but the shock of Kalibangan is realizing that an entire way of coding the universe can vanish without an echo. If you lean close to a shard of their pottery, you can nearly hear the vibration of a potter's wheel humming from the opposite end of time. That hum fades into static, and the static fades into the vast, indifferent quiet of the desert that waited patiently to bury the grid streets before Rome ever dreamed of a forum. The mystery is not that the city died. Death is the destiny of all cities. The mystery is that it was born so bright, so young, so impossibly early in the human dawn. In the end, the planned streets of Kalibangan ask a question that no trowel can answer. How many other perfect grids lie sleeping beneath the silent sand, waiting to undo our arrogance? And as the last light dies over the Thar, you are left alone with the echo of their perfect silence, and the humbling certainty that we are merely the latest civilization to believe we are the first.